So you've probably painted skin before and that's why you're here, and it likely turned out very plasticky or just dead looking, right? Painting skin is something that I vividly remember as being extremely challenging, like I could never get it right until I found the trick to it. And ever since, it's been kind of a piece of cake, so this is what I'm gonna show you in this episode of YouTube Art School. And the method I'm gonna show you actually works for any skin color, so whether it's very light skin or very dark skin, makes no difference. Also works for any style of shading, so it could be cell shaded or just more realistic shading. It's gonna work in any scenario. And maybe the best part, it's super easy to replicate. I guarantee it's going to be a game changer for your character drawing, so let's get into it. Alright, so there's actually two different ways to tackle skin shading like I'm gonna show you, and it just really depends on the software you'll be using. So first I'll show you a setup that works across any software. And the second method, which arguably looks like a tiny bit better but is a little more complicated, will only work in Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint. Maybe Procreate if you know what you're doing. I personally use both methods pretty equally though. And I call this variant the H2LSF method, which I know is a terrible name for it, but it's just an acronym representing the first letter of each of the required layers that we'll be using. On top of the stack, we'll have the highlights, then two lights layer, hence the two L's, a shading layer, and a color flats layer. And that's it. No nonsense setup using, like a dozen or more layers. You'll see this is all that you'll ever need. So before I go and paint anything, let's actually adjust the layer blend modes for these so that all the technical parts of this method are basically over and done with. Obviously, also I didn't mention it, but you might have a sketch or a line art layer on top of all of that to guide you. But yeah, this is my sketch layer, and I'll actually lower the opacity a little bit as I work on the skin. Now, the highlights layer directly under the line art layer will be set to hard light blend mode. The first light layer directly under will set to hard light mode also, and then the second light layer as well. So far, pretty simple. Then I'll have the shading layer set to multiply blend mode, and the flats layer at the bottom of our stack we'll just leave as is. Now all of these layers I'll set as clipping masks to the flats layer to keep things clean. Now wherever I paint, it'll only ever affect the region I painted my flat colors on. And with that out of the way, let's start painting from the bottom up, starting with the flats. Wait, no, that's already done. Easy. Step 1 done. Next we're moving up to the shading layer, and I'll just keep things super simple for now and shade with black or dark gray, whatever. The higher the contrast, basically, the easier it is to get accurate shading because it exposes all the flaws. But don't worry though, we won't leave it black because that's a big contributor to making our skin look dead. So obviously, we don't want that. It's just way easier to shade this way at this stage. So, like I said, the skin color itself is completely irrelevant, so pick whatever you want. I just find it helps when it's lighter at this stage so that I can really see the shading with maximum contrast. So with my quick shading pass done, I have a mix of like smooth and cell shading in here, as you can see. Maybe I should have done one character fully cell shaded instead of just half of one. But anyways, it'll still get the point across, hopefully. Now, before we move on to the lighting, where everything will click for you, I guarantee, let's lock the alpha of the shading layer and paint over this black layer with a dark red color instead. Again, it doesn't need to be exactly the same color I'm using here, it's just a color in this area of the color picker. And then with everything painted over, I think it looks a lot better already. Now we can move up to the first light, the main light source. I'll pick a random color direction and paint a light from imagination to show off, but before I could do that, I used to use a lot of references like Magic Poser Web, for example, to help me. So I recommend you do the same. Now everything is pretty intense, when using the hard light blend mode, so it might need a few tests before you nail the right one, like the right color for the lighting, right? But I'm painting with this color here if you want to use the same one, kind of this light beige color. Now finally, here's what's going to take this skin shading to the next level. Getting rid of the black shading was a minor step towards that goal, but this is the big one. Because what we have so far, it looks alright, but it's not quite skin. Because you see, skin is semi-translucent, meaning it lets a little bit of light through it, which penetrates the surface of the skin, bounces around, and bounces out. A little bit of it at least. And this is the effect a lot of you probably already know as subsurface scattering. And that's really what makes skin tones believable. So science aside, what this translates to visually is this reddish Terminator color. And I've mentioned what that is in recent videos, but if you weren't there, that's what we call the transition between the highlights and the shadows. So if we were to imagine like a semi-translucent plastic, it would still have a Terminator, but since there's no blood sub-layer to illuminate, the color will just be the same as the plastic color, maybe just a little more saturated. With skin though, regardless of the skin color, the Terminator transition will always be a reddish tint. Again, because what's beneath the skin is red, right? So that's what makes skin look like skin. So here I added a new layer to paint that tinted Terminator on, also using the hard light blend mode. So this is a pretty quick step, just painting over the transition with a soft brush and a dark red color. So done very quickly, this is the before and after. And I think it's so much better. But alternatively, if you have Photoshop, a quicker way to do this even is using an outer glow layer style. So in that case, there would be nothing to paint at all. But yeah, only works in Photoshop, unfortunately. Or fortunately, if that's what you use too. But here's what it looked like before and after. Hell yeah, now that skin is starting to look pretty good. And now you might be wondering, how much better can this actually get? Because this is peak already. But we only have 2 more quick steps left to do, and you'll see, I think it makes a big difference. So let's move on to the second light. This time I'll select a cooler blue color to balance out the warm lighting that we have already. And let's have it come from the opposite direction of the main light source. I'll quickly soft brush it on. And for this second light source, it's just important that it doesn't overpower the first one. So we can adjust down the layer opacity a little bit until we find a good spot. Something like this maybe, very subtle, but it's still present. So here's what we got so far. Flat colors, the shading layer tinted red, the first light, the reddish Terminator, and the second light. Now, all that's left is the very subtle reflections that you'll typically see on skin, especially on areas of the body where the skin is stretched out a little bit more, creating a smoother reflective surface. Areas like the thighs, maybe firm abs, the forearm skin, the forehead, the tip of the nose, and I'm using just a white color here to do this. The more heavily you paint the reflections, the wetter the surface will seem also. So you might want to adjust the layer opacity if you went a little overboard with it. Or not, if you want your character to look sweaty, I guess. So anyways, here's the final result. Looks pretty good, huh? I agree. But we still have the other better method that I wanted to show you. And we've yet to test all of it with different skin colors to see if it holds up. So we'll do that next. And all of this kind of thing we've been looking at so far, like understanding why skin looks and behaves, visually a certain way. That's the kind of stuff that I go really deep into in my art program, the sponsor of this video. Skin is just a tiny topic in one of the classes out of 30 in-depth classes that basically cover everything you would need to draw or paint anything you can imagine. You'll learn the content in the exact right order to maximize your progress. You get lifetime access to everything, you get all future updates for free, and a private Discord full of artists working through the same stuff as you are. And lucky for you, we actually extended the big summer sale until the end of this month, so you'll be able to get it at a massive discount for just a little bit longer. So check the link down below in the video description for all of the details. Like I said, there's still some time to take advantage, so check it out if you've been looking to take your art to the next level. Now, you don't need anything like this to get better at art, right? You could figure it out all by yourself, just like I did over many years, decades. But if you want all of that experience condensed in just one package, well, maybe Art School is for you. Just check it out. I think you'll be glad you did. Now let's get back to the video. So here's the better method, in my opinion. What I call the H2L GSF method. Another very poorly named one, and really the only difference between this one and the first method is the addition of the G in the name, and this stands for gradient map. So going back to the same layer stack we had, the only difference here will be in how I treat the shading layer. I'll actually just keep it black in this case, and instead of tinting it dark red, I'll pop a gradient map adjustment layer on top of it. Now, it'll just apply some nonsense gradient on this, but don't panic, we'll get this looking good in no time. I actually have a bunch of gradient maps that I use frequently here, and you can also grab those for free with the link in the video description, right below my art program link if you want. And what's cool with this is I can just select any of my skin presets here to get this really rich, colorful gradients of colors instead of just the 2 tones that I had before. The 2 tones being the base skin color and the shadow color. With gradient maps, it is a subtle effect here, but what the gradient maps allows me to control is the color of every shade of gray that I want for my shading. I'm not limited to 2. For now, I'll just apply this gradient, and that's it. Now I can enable all the other layers that we had already done, and you can see the difference between the two methods. In my opinion, using gradient maps gives us just a slightly richer color palette. But like I said at the beginning, you can really only do this in Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint. Now, we've only seen fair skin, but what about the other skin tones? Will it still hold up? Yes. Yes, it will. So when we use the gradient maps method, it's as simple as using a darker gradient like this, and likely also adjusting the light's intensity down a little bit. But there you go. Dark skin in seconds, literally. But if you're using the first method, it's still super simple. All you gotta do is adjust the base skin color here to a darker color, and you're all set. Can you believe this? Some call it black magic. I call it knowledge. Knowledge that you now possess. And check this out. We can even go crazier with this and select alien skin colors, and it'll work just as well. And it's super fun to play with this. It's almost like a game character creator. It's the one skin shading method to rule them all. And before we wrap up, a quiz for you. If we were painting creatures that don't have red blood, unlike the human characters I've been working on here, what would we need to change for skin to still look like skin? Any guesses based on what I explained about subsurface scattering earlier? Write it down in the comments and I'll like your comment if you get it right. And that's basically it. If you look at where we started compared to where we are now, the whole difference really depends on whether you understand how light behaves under the skin or not. And now you do. So hopefully painting skin will stop, being such a struggle for you like it was for me back in the days. But there's also a possibility that what's letting you down is not necessarily the coloring part, but the shading part. And if that's the case, you should watch my video on rendering and shading, and it'll appear right here on screen in just a second. I'll see you over there next. Just click on the link. Do it. Do it now.